I'm sick of watching Caitlin getting attacked. If the league doesn't step up and protect her, things are going to get ugly real fast.
Alyssa Thomas, that's what she does. She uses her body.
And that still happens?
What?
Absolutely unacceptable.
No, she didn't, dude.
Absolutely
she just
unacceptable.
cursed.
And the reckless closeout that they actually reviewed, and the foot still comes down on top of the defender's foot that wasn't upgraded? Absolutely disrespectful.
When the greatest shooter in basketball history decides to speak up, the entire sport stops and listens. Steph Curry doesn't involve himself in league drama. He doesn't make statements. He doesn't take sides. But on June 24th, 2026, something happened that forced him to break that silence, and his response shook the WNBA to its core. A fist landed on Caitlin Clark's throat during a game between the Indiana Fever and Phoenix Mercury. The referee was standing right there. No whistle, no flagrant, nothing. And that's when Curry realized this wasn't just another dirty play in professional basketball. This was a pattern. This was negligence. This was a league failing to protect its most important player. What happened next would expose a fundamental problem that's been brewing for months, and it would unite the entire basketball world in a way few controversies ever have. June 24th, 2026. Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury. Second quarter. The kind of game that should have been celebrated for what it represented, two teams battling for playoff position, showcasing some of the best talent in the WNBA. But instead, this game would become the moment when patience finally ran out and silence transformed into unified fury across every corner of the basketball universe. It started with a loose ball. Two players battling for it the way players do thousands of times every season. This is competitive basketball. This is what you're supposed to see. Battle, physicality, fighting for possession. Nothing unusual about the setup, but what happened next would be impossible to ignore or excuse away. While Caitlin Clark was still on the ground, defenseless, and with the play already dead, Alyssa Thomas drove her fist directly into Clark's throat. That wasn't incidental contact. That wasn't a byproduct of fighting for the ball. That was a deliberate strike to a vulnerable player in a vulnerable position. And then Thomas stepped over her like she was nothing, like she was just debris on the court to be stepped around. A referee was standing right there on the baseline, not 10 feet away, not blocked by other players, right there. Close enough to see every detail, close enough to make the call. And the whistle never came. The official did nothing. The ball was gone, the play was dead, and somehow that made it even worse because there was no possible basketball reason for the contact. There was no argument about incidental contact or getting tangled up. This was just a fist driven into a throat and then a step over. The replay made it even clearer. While Clark was on the ground trying to get up, Thomas didn't just throw one strike. She drove her knee into Clark's thigh first. Then came the fist to the neck. Two deliberate contact points on a defenseless player while an official watched from the baseline, and nothing happened. Caitlin Clark stayed in the game initially, tried to keep playing like she always does. But the damage was done. She made it to the third quarter before a back injury forced her out. The most important player in the entire WNBA, the player this league has bet its future on, was gone from the game because nobody had the courage to blow the whistle on what everyone could see. But the basketball world saw it, all of it, and the response was instantaneous and unified in a way that rarely happens in sports. NBA fans saw it, WNBA fans saw it, casual viewers who don't normally follow either league saw it, analysts saw it, coaches saw it, former players saw it, and they all responded with the same voice: this is unacceptable. The social media reaction was swift and brutal. New viewers who stumbled onto that game were stunned. I honestly don't watch a lot of WNBA games, but I'm watching this one person wrote. Is this normal for her? My goodness. That comment matters because it represents exactly what the WNBA is fighting against. You finally get a new viewer interested enough to tune in, and the first thing they see is a punch to the throat with no consequences. That's not growing the sport. That's actively pushing people away. Longtime fans and analysts weren't pulling punches either. The refereeing is just out of control in the WNBA. If they're not careful, one of perhaps the best of their superstars will get seriously hurt, one fan posted. Another wrote simply, CC claps technical, AT punches CC in the throat, that's fine. What a joke. The consistency of reactions was striking. There was no defending this. There was no gray area. Even people who'd never watched a WNBA game before could understand the fundamental wrong of what they'd witnessed. A player attacked another player. A referee saw it. Nothing happened. It doesn't get simpler than that, and it doesn't get worse. This wasn't just frustration over one play. This was the moment when frustration became something else entirely. This was the moment when people started asking bigger questions about whether the WNBA had lost control of its own product. To understand why this moment became a breaking point, you have to understand exactly what happened and why it matters so much more than just another controversial call. This wasn't a bang-bang play where officials had a split second to make a decision. This was calculated, deliberate, and completely visible. The loose ball situation itself was normal. Fever and Mercury players were battling for possession in the paint. The intensity was high, but standard for professional basketball. Two teams fighting for every possession, every rebound, every advantage. That's competitive play. That's what should happen. But this moment wouldn't stay competitive. As the ball moved away from the action and the play was beginning to be considered dead, Alyssa Thomas made a choice. She looked down at Caitlin Clark still on the ground and made a decision that would change everything. With the ball no longer in that immediate area, with the play effectively over, Thomas positioned herself over Clark's body and drove her fist directly into her throat. The replay showed the exact sequence. First the knee driving into Clark's thigh, then the fist driving into her neck. Two separate contact points on a completely defenseless player. Clark wasn't holding the ball. She wasn't fighting back. She was down, vulnerable, and completely exposed. This wasn't a basketball play. This was an attack. What makes this even more inexcusable is the positioning of the officials. One referee was standing directly on the baseline, close enough to have a clear view of everything that was happening. There was no obstruction. There was no chaos blocking the sight line. The official had a direct angle to see the knee, the fist, the step over, everything. There was absolutely nothing preventing the call from being made, and yet the whistle never blew. This wasn't a judgment call where reasonable people might disagree about what they saw. This wasn't a case where you'd need to review replay to understand what happened. This was real-time violence on a professional basketball court in front of an official who had every opportunity to stop it. The failure wasn't about interpretation. The failure was about action or the complete lack of it. The aftermath was telling too. Thomas stepped over Clark's body like it was nothing. Like she wasn't even a person on the court, but just an obstacle to be navigated around. That step over carried a message all by itself. It said, "I did what I did, and I'm not concerned about any consequence." Because at that moment, with the whistle silent and the official doing nothing, she was right. There was no consequence coming. Clark eventually got up and tried to keep playing. That's what superstars do. They get hit, they get fouled, they get mistreated, and they keep fighting because they're competitors. But the damage was physical and it was real. By the third quarter, a back injury that stemmed from that contact forced her out of the game entirely. When you look at the play in isolation, it's stunning. A deliberate strike to a defenseless player. A referee watching it happen. No call. That's the basic story. But when you put it in context with everything else that had been happening to Clark all season, it becomes something darker. It becomes a pattern. It becomes evidence of systemic failure. The WNBA had every tool available to make the right call in that moment. The referee was right there. The contact was clear. The player was defenseless. Every single element was present for the official to make the call and for the league to have a teachable moment about protecting its stars. Instead, silence. The official stood there and did nothing. And in that moment of inaction, a message was sent to every player on every court in this league. You can get away with this. That message would have consequences that extended far beyond just one play, one game, or one player. This is where the story becomes something bigger than just a WNBA controversy. This is where it becomes about the entire basketball world looking at what's happening to Caitlin Clark and recognizing something familiar. Because Caitlin Clark isn't just connected to Steph Curry through reputation or mutual respect. Their connection runs deeper, and it reveals why his voice in this situation carries so much weight. Ahead of the 2026 WNBA season, Caitlin Clark made a very deliberate choice about how she wanted to spend her offseason. She could have worked with anyone. She could have hired a trainer focused on WNBA-specific skills or worked with coaches who specialized in women's basketball development. Instead, she sought out Brandon Payne, Steph Curry's personal trainer. not because she was starstruck, not because of name recognition, but because she understood something fundamental about what makes Curry great, and she wanted to access that same training philosophy. "I knew he worked with Steph, and I love Steph's game," Clark said when the training relationship became public. "Just looking for some creative ways to make myself better and challenge myself." That's not fandom talking. That's professional respect. That's one of the best players in basketball looking at another all-time great and saying, "I want to understand how you think about this game." But here's what's even more important. This training relationship created a real connection between two players who understand something about basketball that most players never experience. They both know what it's like to be the most important player on their court. They both know what it's like to have every defensive game plan built around stopping them. They both know what happens when you're too good to be stopped cleanly. In January 2026, just months before the incident with Alyssa Thomas, this connection became undeniably public. Curry was playing against the Charlotte Hornets and getting absolutely manhandled. Grabbing, holding, physical defense that had nothing to do with the basketball and everything to do with frustration that they couldn't stop him through legal means. The kind of treatment that happens to the greatest players in any sport when opponents realize they can't win fairly. Caitlin Clark was watching, and she saw herself in that moment. She commented under the video, "We want to see Steph make 12 threes a game. Stop grabbing him, please." That comment did something remarkable. It bridged two leagues. It showed that the best player in the WNBA understood exactly what the best shooter in NBA history was experiencing. But more than that, it showed that she was experiencing something similar. When Curry saw that comment, he immediately understood what she was really saying. She wasn't just making a casual observation about his game. She was speaking about her own experience. She was saying, "This is happening to me too. I see you dealing with this, and I deal with this every single night." Analysts picked up on it immediately. Robin Lundberg, looking at that comment thread, observed something crucial. It almost felt like Caitlin Clark was speaking for herself in a sense by saying that about Steph. He was right. That comment was Clark telling the world that she understood the burden of being too good, too important, too much of a threat to be stopped cleanly. So when Alyssa Thomas drove a fist into Clark's throat on June 24th, Steph Curry didn't just see a controversial play in a WNBA game. He saw the exact thing he'd been dealing with his entire career finally escalate to physical violence in a league where the star player wasn't being protected. He saw the pattern that Clark had been describing. He saw what happens when referees decide not to act. And that's why his response mattered so much. Because Curry doesn't speak up about league drama. He doesn't insert himself into controversies. But when he looked at what happened to Clark, he saw a mirror. He saw the physical brutality that the sport's best players have to absorb simply because they're too good to be stopped cleanly. And he decided that enough was enough. Their connection wasn't just about training with the same coach. It was about understanding the same burden. Here's what makes the Alyssa Thomas incident so infuriating to everyone who's been paying attention. It didn't happen in a vacuum. This wasn't an isolated moment of aggression that came out of nowhere. This was the explosion at the end of a long, documented pattern of mistreatment that Caitlin Clark has endured since her first day in the WNBA. Go back through the season and watch the games. Actually watch them. Not highlight reels or social media clips, but full games where you can see what's happening off the ball. What you'll find is relentless physical contact that goes largely uncalled. Clark gets grabbed. She gets pulled at. She gets pressed. And most of the time, the contact happens when she doesn't even have the basketball. Other teams have figured out the playbook. You can't stop Caitlin Clark through legal basketball means. She's too skilled, too smart, too competitive. So if you can't stop her with basketball, you stop her with physical contact. You make her uncomfortable. You make her think twice before making certain moves. You muddy the waters so much that the officials have a harder time tracking what's legal and what isn't. This is the exact same thing that happens to Steph Curry in the NBA, night after night. Opponents know they can't guard him straight up, so they grab him off the ball. They hold him on screens. They press him constantly. And in the NBA, there are consequences for that behavior. Flagrant fouls get called. Players get ejected. Suspensions happen. The league protects its stars because it understands that protecting your best players protects your product. The WNBA hasn't made that choice. Not yet. Curry has lived with this treatment his entire career. He's felt it thousands of times. The difference is that the NBA, for all its flaws, has systems in place to manage and punish players who take shortcuts against superstars. It's not perfect, but there's a framework. There are consequences. Players know that if they cross the line, they'll face a fine, a flagrant foul, maybe even a suspension. Watch Curry play any given night and you'll see constant contact. You'll see grabbing and holding that doesn't get called because it's become normalized. But when it crosses a certain line, when it becomes egregious, the NBA steps in. The league has drawn a line and says, "This far, but no further. We will protect this player." The WNBA has failed to draw that line, and Caitlin Clark has paid the price for that failure. What's happening to her isn't new in professional basketball. The best players always face this kind of treatment. It's the cost of being irreplaceable, but it's manageable if the league takes action. It's containable if there are consequences. It becomes dangerous, truly dangerous, when the league watches it happen and does nothing. Throughout the 2026 season, Clark has had to absorb punishment that would draw flags and fines in the NBA. She's been held on screens. She's been grabbed off the ball. She's had defenders lean on her. And most of the time, it's gone unpunished. But there's a difference between muddying the waters with physical defense and driving your fist into someone's throat. That's where the pattern becomes violent. That's where acceptable physicality becomes assault. And that's where the league's inaction becomes truly inexcusable. Steph Curry understands this escalation because he's seen it happen in the NBA too. When players sense that a superstar isn't being protected, when they see that aggressive contact is being tolerated, it emboldens other players. It creates a culture where shortcuts are acceptable. And eventually, someone crosses the line from tough defense to physical violence. The incident with Alyssa Thomas wasn't random. It was the logical endpoint of months of inadequate officiating and league inaction. Thomas didn't wake up on June 24th and decide out of nowhere to punch Caitlin Clark in the throat. She did it because she'd been watching all season. She'd seen how Clark was being treated. She'd seen what was being allowed. And she thought she could get away with it. And she was right. That's the real scandal. Not that Thomas committed an aggressive act. Players commit aggressive acts all the time. The scandal is that the system failed to protect the player it was supposed to protect, and in doing so, it signaled to every other player in the league that they could do the same. The reaction to what happened on June 24th was unlike almost anything the WNBA has experienced in recent years. This wasn't a divided fan base where some people defended the contact and others criticized it. This wasn't a situation where the league could point to conflicting opinions about what should have happened. Instead, there was something remarkable: complete and total unity across every segment of the basketball world. Social media exploded almost immediately, and what's striking about the reaction isn't just its intensity, it's its consistency. Fans, analysts, athletes, former players, journalists, casual viewers, hardcore devotees, everyone had the same reaction. Outrage, disgust, disbelief. One fan posted, "The refereeing is just out of control in the WNBA. If they're not careful, one of perhaps the best of their superstars will get seriously hurt." That comment captures something important. This wasn't just anger about this one play. It was fear about where this is heading if nothing changes. It was recognition that Caitlin Clark's safety is being compromised by a system that isn't protecting her. Another viewer, someone who explicitly said they don't regularly follow the WNBA, was stunned enough by what they saw to write, "I honestly don't watch a lot of WNBA games, but I'm watching this one. I mean, is this normal for her? My goodness." That person represents exactly what the WNBA needs: new viewers, curious people willing to give the league a chance. And what was their first impression? A fist to the throat. No call, that's not how you build a fan base. The criticism got harsher as the night went on. Someone wrote, "CC claps technical. AT punches CC in the throat. That's fine. What a joke." Another person added, "Immediately should have been a tech. AT plays dirty and it's uncalled for. These refs are a joke." The message was clear from the ground level. The people who actually watch this game understand the difference between physical defense and deliberate violence. But the reaction didn't stay on social media. It reached the people who actually have power to make change, and they responded too. Sports Illustrated's Robin Lundberg, someone whose opinion carries weight across the basketball world, issued a clear call. The WNBA must suspend Alyssa Thomas for the dirty play she made against Caitlin Clark. Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy, who has a massive platform and significant influence, posted simply, "What are we even doing here? Brutal cheap shot." 5 words that captured the absolute bewilderment people were feeling. What are we even doing? How is this acceptable? Why is this happening? Former WNBA star Stacey Dales, someone who played in this league and understands its culture from the inside, delivered what might be the most damning assessment. This is pathetic, not even loose ball worthy. League needs to review this, completely uncalled for. But then she added something even more important, and of course they got what they wanted. Clark out for the game. That comment shifted the entire narrative. This wasn't just about the play being called wrong. This was about intentional harm being inflicted on the most important player in the league. When a former WNBA player looks at another player's actions and concludes that the intent was to remove the star from the game, that's significant. That's insider knowledge. That's someone who understands how the league works saying, this was calculated. What made the reaction even more powerful was that it wasn't limited to WNBA coverage or basketball insiders. This story spread across mainstream sports media. NBA fans saw it. College basketball fans saw it. People who hadn't thought about women's basketball in years were suddenly talking about it. The viral nature of the reaction forced the conversation into spaces where the WNBA couldn't ignore it or contain it. The unified response created pressure that was almost impossible for the league to avoid. This wasn't a niche basketball discussion. This was a mainstream sports story now, with major figures from across the industry weighing in with the same conclusion. Something needs to happen. Outkick's John Root captured the moral weight of the moment. It's insane how the WNBA allows the most important, influential, and popular player in league history to get treated like literal garbage. Caitlin Clark deserves better. That statement does something important. It reframes this from being about one play to being about systemic values. If the WNBA allows this to happen to its biggest star, what does that say about the league's priorities? The consistency of these reactions mattered because it removed any ability for the league to argue that this was a matter of perspective or interpretation. There was no defending this moment. There was no gray area. Everyone saw the same thing, understood the same thing, and reached the same conclusion. The WNBA was facing unified pressure like it hadn't faced in years, all because of one uncalled fist to the throat. If there was ever a moment when the WNBA couldn't claim that this was being overblown or misunderstood, it came at the post-game podium when Stephanie White, the Indiana Fever's head coach, decided she'd had enough of silence. This was the moment when someone with authority inside the league system stood up and articulated exactly what had happened and exactly why it was unacceptable. White showed up to that podium with fire in her eyes. She wasn't there to make excuses. She wasn't there to deflect or minimize. She came prepared to speak truth directly to the league office and everyone listening. I just saw it. I'm not sure if it had any impact on her health or not, but it was egregious. The fact that it was a no call. White started by acknowledging what everyone had seen, a clear, obvious violation that went uncalled. Then she revealed something crucial. I heard about it at halftime. I brought it to the attention of the officials at halftime, yet we still had 11 fouls in the fourth quarter to their 2. They still shot 24 free throws in the second half. What White was doing here was brilliant and damning. She was showing that even after she brought the incident to the officials' attention during halftime, even after she made it clear that her star player had been violently assaulted, the officiating didn't improve. In fact, it got worse. The Mercury shot 24 free throws in the second half. The Fever committed 11 fouls in the fourth quarter compared to 2 for their opponents. The message was clear. The officials were punishing the victim and rewarding the aggressor. Then White shifted to what might be the most infuriating part of the sequence. Reckless closeout that they actually reviewed, and the foot still comes down on top of the defender's foot. That wasn't upgraded, absolutely unacceptable. She was talking about a second incident where officials actually had the opportunity to review a play on the monitor, looked at it, saw egregious contact, and still did nothing. They had the technology. They had the video. They had the second chance to make the right call. And they failed again. Absolutely disrespectful, White said, and you could hear the anger in those words. This wasn't just frustration about a call. This was fury at a system that had multiple opportunities to protect her player and failed repeatedly. Then White delivered what might be the quote that should haunt the WNBA. The fist in the throat is crazy. It's crazy. It's dangerous. She wasn't mincing words. She was saying explicitly what everyone was thinking. This was an abnormally violent act. It wasn't just physicality. It was dangerous. It had the potential to cause serious injury. But then she went even deeper into the systemic failure. The landing spot, when you went to review it and she still comes down on top of another foot, I don't know. Because to me, that's like a do-over on a test. How do you screw it up again? That metaphor is perfect. The WNBA had a second chance. They looked at the replay. They had the information they needed, and they still failed. How do you screw up the test when you're allowed to take it again? White continued, building momentum. We have a generational talent and a WNBA superstar who had 2 cheap shots right there that weren't called. And I just say again, absolutely unacceptable. She was tying this back to what the incident meant contextually. This wasn't just about one punch. This was about 2 separate violations against the league's most important player, both of which went unpunished. What made White's statement even more powerful was the controlled fury of it. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't being emotional in a way that would allow critics to dismiss her as being overly reactive. She was methodical. She laid out the facts. She explained the implications. And then she made her judgment absolutely unacceptable. Twice. The impact of White's response was immediate. It gave credibility to every fan who was angry. It gave structure to the outrage. When the coach of the victims team goes on record saying the league failed her player systematically and repeatedly, it becomes impossible for the league to argue that nothing was wrong. White basically said, "The officials saw it and did nothing. I reported it at halftime and the officiating got worse. They had a second chance to fix it on replay and still failed. There is no excuse. There is no explanation." This is a league-wide failure to protect its star player. Her post-game statement became the punctuation mark on everything the basketball world had been saying, but it came from inside the system. It came from someone with authority. It came from someone who'd been watching this pattern all season and was finally breaking her silence. Here's what most people miss when they focus on the initial incident. The real scandal isn't the fist to the throat. The real scandal is what happened after. The real scandal is that the WNBA had every opportunity to address this and chose not to. In the modern NBA and WNBA, plays can be reviewed. Referees have the ability to look at replays and upgrade infractions if they've missed the severity of what occurred. A flagrant one can become a flagrant 2. An uncalled play can be called after review. The technology exists. The rules exist. The mechanisms exist. Everything needed to correct this mistake was in place. And the WNBA looked at the replay and did nothing. That's not about judgment calls or interpretation. That's not about whether someone thinks a contact was too hard or not hard enough. That's about a league office that had the opportunity to send a message. We see what happened, we will not tolerate this, and instead sent the opposite message. They said, we see it, and we don't care enough to act. When you understand this, the entire situation becomes darker. This isn't just about one referee making a bad call in real time. Bad calls happen. Referees miss things. Referees make mistakes. That's part of sports. But when a league reviews an incident and deliberately chooses not to act, that's a choice. That's a decision. That's a statement of values. Think about what the WNBA could have done. They could have issued a statement saying that they reviewed the play, found it egregious, and issued a fine. They could have suspended Thomas for 1 game, establishing that this behavior has consequences. They could have upgraded the contact to a flagrant foul retroactively and allowed it to count toward Thomas's total. They had options, multiple options. Every single one of them would have sent a message that the league cares about protecting its players. Instead, they chose the option that sends the worst possible message. This is where Stephanie White's point about the do-over on a test becomes so crucial. The WNBA literally had a second chance. They looked at the play on a monitor, had all the information they needed, and still failed. It's not even a matter of things happening too fast or the chaos of the moment. They had time, they had video, they had clarity, and they chose to do nothing. What makes this choice even more bewildering is that it came just hours after the incident had already gone viral. The WNBA knew the basketball world was watching. The WNBA knew that major figures from the NBA were weighing in. The WNBA knew that casual fans who'd never thought about women's basketball before were suddenly paying attention. And in that moment, with all that scrutiny, they chose to do nothing. The word that should terrify every fan of this league is could. The WNBA could look into this via replay review. The WNBA could issue discipline. The WNBA could send a message. That word could means that it's possible but not guaranteed. And as long as could remains the word that describes the WNBA's willingness to act, players like Caitlin Clark are not safe. Could is a word of possibility. It implies optionality. It means the league might act or it might not. And until could transforms into will, until the WNBA establishes that it will consistently protect its stars and punish players who commit violent acts, nothing changes. Caitlin Clark doesn't need the WNBA to be perfect. She doesn't need every controversial play to be called exactly right. What she needs is for the league to demonstrate that it cares enough about her safety to take action when something is this egregious, this obvious, this violent. The review was supposed to be the moment that happened. The review was supposed to be the correction. Instead, the review became the symbol of the league's failure. Because when you have the chance to fix a mistake and you don't, that's not a mistake anymore. That's a choice. And the WNBA's choice was to let Alyssa Thomas walk away without consequence. That choice echoes. It sends a signal to every player in this league that they can get away with this. They can be aggressive. They can be violent. They can assault the league's best player and face no discipline. Because the league had its chance to act and it didn't. Until the WNBA changes that choice, nothing else matters. As we stand here in the aftermath of this incident, there's only one question that matters. Not whether Alyssa Thomas committed a violent act, that's documented. Not whether it was egregious, everyone agrees on that. Not whether the league saw it, they absolutely did. The only question that matters is this: what is the WNBA going to do about it? Because this moment is a test. It's a fundamental test of what the WNBA values and what it's willing to fight for. The way the league responds to this incident will tell you everything you need to know about whether it's serious about protecting its stars or whether it's content to let them be victimized on the court. Suspension is the only appropriate response here. Not a fine, not a stern talking to, a suspension. Alyssa Thomas needs to miss games. She needs to understand that there are consequences for what she did. And every other player in the WNBA needs to understand that if they follow her example, they'll face the same consequences. But here's what should scare you if you care about this league. We're not confident that's going to happen. We're not sure the WNBA has the backbone to take the action that everyone outside the league office seems to think is necessary, because the league has already had one chance to act and it chose not to. What makes us think they'll act now? The precedent matters here. If the WNBA suspends Alyssa Thomas, it sends a message. We have a line and you cannot cross it. If they don't, they send the opposite message. We're fine with this. We can live with violence against our stars. We're willing to tolerate aggression because maybe it helps the game or maybe we just don't care enough to act. Think about what this means for Caitlin Clark's future in this league. If there's no suspension, if she has to go back out there knowing that the player who punched her in the throat faced no meaningful consequences, what does that do to her? How does that affect her approach to the game? Does she become more cautious, more fearful? Does she play tentatively because she knows the league won't have her back? That's the real stakes here. This isn't abstract. This isn't about sounding tough or making a political statement. This is about whether one of the greatest basketball talents of this generation will be able to play freely in a league that's supposed to protect her. There's also the question of what message a non-suspension would send to every player who plays against Caitlin Clark. If there are no consequences for Alyssa Thomas, then why would any defender hesitate to use the same tactics? Why would they play clean when they know they can be aggressive with impunity? What you'd see is an escalation. Each game would get a little more physical. Each incident would be a little more violent. And Caitlin Clark would be left in the middle, the victim of a league that decided protecting her wasn't a priority. The WNBA likes to talk about growing the game. They talk about building the league's profile. They talk about attracting new viewers and mainstream credibility. But you can't have any of that if your star player is being assaulted on the court and the league does nothing. The casual fan who tuned in for the first time during that game saw a fist to the throat and zero consequences. That's not a compelling brand. That's not something people want to invest their time and emotion into. Steph Curry understood that when he spoke up. He understood that this is bigger than basketball. He understood that when you allow the best player in your league to be treated like this, you're making a statement about your league's values. And he decided that statement was unacceptable. Now it's the WNBA's turn to decide what it believes. Do they believe Caitlin Clark is worth protecting? Do they believe their league's credibility matters? Do they believe that preventing violence is more important than any other consideration? The world is watching. Steph Curry is watching. Every player in the NBA is watching. Casual basketball fans who have never followed the WNBA are watching. And they're all asking the same question: will the WNBA finally do what needs to be done? That's the story now, not the incident, not the reaction. The story is what happens next. The WNBA stands at a crossroads. On one side is a league that protects its stars, establishes boundaries, and demonstrates that violence has consequences. On the other side is a league that looked at a fist to Caitlin Clark's throat and decided it wasn't worth acting on. The choice the league makes in the next few days will define not just this moment, but the entire direction of the WNBA for years to come. Steph Curry's statement wasn't random. He saw something in what happened to Clark that he recognizes from his own experience: a league deciding whether it's serious enough to protect its best player. The basketball world has already spoken with one voice. The question now is whether the WNBA will listen. Because if they don't, if they let this moment pass without meaningful consequences, every conversation about growing the league, about mainstream credibility, about attracting new fans becomes meaningless. You can't build something great on a foundation that allows violence against your stars. The answer comes next.